finally got up. I could score.
Hey, Rich.
How are you, friend?
Who does? Not sure. Oh. Good evening and welcome to the Planning Committee meeting, Southwestern School District Board of School Directors, January the 11th is 7:01. Would you please rise and pledge the flag with me? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And just as I received an alert from my own phone to put it on vibrate. So if you haven't, please do so. We did not have a need for an executive session this evening. Jeff, would you call roll, please?
Mrs. Berger.
Here.
Mrs. Boyer.
Here.
Mr. Klausby.
Here.
Mr. Galazello.
Here.
Mr. Mummert.
Here.
Mr. Plessick.
Here.
Mrs. Rinker. Mrs. Weaver.
Here.
Mrs. Yingst.
Here.
8 present, 1 absent.
And Dr. Jim Brinker was here just a few minutes ago. He tells me that Ann is now at home, recovering, but the recovery is going to take a long time. She had emergency surgery on the left leg due to the lack of feeling and blood flow in the left leg. So she's at home and recovering and doing better. I do have some people who have signed in no one to immediately address an item as far as on the agenda is concerned, these names will all be added to our minutes. So moving on to our next item on the agenda is our audit report from Boyer and Ritter. And I won't steal Jeff's thunder, but. Go ahead.
Jessica is here from Boyer and Ritter to go over our most recent audit report. So the floor is yours.
I don't think it is. I didn't turn it on.
Okay, good evening. I am Jacqueline Davidson with Boyer and Ritter. I've been a manager with the firm for a lot of years actually now. Time flies, right? But have been working on this audit engagement for actually multiple years now as well. Really enjoy the opportunity to work with the district. So first and foremost, thank you for your time. Thank you for the opportunity to be your auditors. And a big thank you to Jeff and his team and all of their hard work that goes into this audit. So in the financial statements, they're about 100 plus pages now. I think they get a little longer every year. So certainly not going through all of that. Just want to call your attention, make some highlights, kind of explain briefly the gist of the financial statements and what to look for. So the first thing that you run into is the independent auditor's report. It's actually not on a numbered page. It's about page 2 though. You'll see that the format changed a little bit this year if you're familiar with what it looked like historically. Basically, same gist, just more detail about what is actually what an audit entails. So if you read through that, you would find that we issued a clean opinion is how you would essentially define it. And it will tell you that we conducted our audit in accordance with generally accepted auditing standards as well as government auditing standards. And essentially, that's an audit based on a risk-based approach and materiality thresholds. Okay, so if you flip to page 4, this is what starts management discussion and analysis. This is the section that is written by your management team and is a good section to read if you're not going to read anything else. It gives comparative information, which there is no other section within the financial statements that truly does that. So this would be a good area to focus on. Page 24 is what starts what we refer to as government-wide financial statements. Those financial statements are the only place for the governmental funds that you will see capital assets and long-term debt. So that's the difference here. It's actually page 24 and 25 this year, but that's the difference from what you would see on a day-to-day basis in your monthly reporting. This statement is different for that reason. So page 24, I always just call attention then, right at the bottom of the first little section there is where you would see construction in progress, land, and your capital assets. Page 25 then, I typically would call attention here to, there's a section that says non-current liabilities. You'll see due within 1 year, due in more than 1 year. Due in more than 1 year is where you see the largest liability, which is the net pension liability. And there's also the other post-employment benefits liability there as well. Those all, they derive from an actuarial valuation. So you don't have any say over those. It's just all based on the valuation and the reports that the district receives. Page 27 is where we start the fund level financial statements. So these would be the statements that you would typically be seeing on a month-to-month basis, your day-to-day reporting. And you'll see one of those columns there says non-major fund. I just want to point out that is your activities funds. If you recall last year that changed historically, it had been a fiduciary fund capacity. There was a new standard that came out in last year's audit that required this to be moved to this statement. So the non-major fund is activity fund. All right. I'm not going to draw attention to any of the numbers there. I'm going to continue to page 31. This is the budget to actual for your general fund. If you look here, you'll see original budget, which would be the budget originally passed and submitted to PDE, final being any transfers that you had approved would be considered into that column. Actual, and then on the far right would be a variance column. There you can then see the variances with various line items. And ultimately at the very bottom, you can see that budget to actual was very comparable. It was only about $31,000 variance. So nothing unusual really to report there. Page 32 starts the food service section. Page 33 is really where you see the revenue and expense. If you recall, typically each year I point out to you that this fund does hold a portion of that net pension and other post-employment benefit liability because it is a proprietary fund. So sometimes that can kind of really skew that change in net position you see at the bottom. This year, just how it all kind of shook out, it really didn't make a net impact very significant, only about $10,000 variance. So if you had removed some of that activity here from this statement so that you'd get more of that general operations number you're used to seeing, you'd be looking at closer to an $81,000 net change positive in the net position. All right, continuing through, you're going to run into fiduciary fund statements. That's going to be your Dollars for Scholars Foundation custodial funds. Then you run into the notes to the financial statements. Lots of background there. Note 1 being the most informative of how various information would be reported through the financial statements. I do draw attention to starting on page 50. We've taken a little bit different approach. Here you're going to start to see where accounting pronouncements that were issued this year were considered for implementation. It will also define to you some that are upcoming. So this year, actually back in the audit report when we first started conversation, there's a paragraph in there that says emphasis of matter. It'll draw attention to a new standard. It was called GASB 87. It was a new lease standard. That went into effect this year. So that is the only one that had some impact on your financial statements that you're looking at in front of you. What that did was if you lease, we do consider materiality there and what's actually a significant dollar. But basically, if you have a lease and you lease a piece of equipment, you now have to report on your financial statements, that government-wide one where I said you report liabilities. You have to report on there that you have the right to use of somebody else's asset. So you have an asset and a liability, and just adding a little bit to the complication probably, but it is the new standard. It is in here. And going forward, we will be considering, there's another standard that will go into effect next year, and it has to do with subscription-based information technology agreements. So that will be the next big one to consider. So I did want to draw your attention to that. All right, continuing back, there's all sorts of different disclosures, capital assets, long-term debt, a really long, nice pension disclosure if you want to read it. And then ultimately, it's going to be right around page 86, 87. This is where you hit the supplementary information. So this is because the district expends over $750,000 of federal funds, they're required to have that single audit. I know you've heard of it, uniform guidance. This is the section that happens because of that. So there you're going to find 2 audit reports. The first one is page 86 and 87, and it'll say report on internal control over financial reporting. You read through that, it's ultimately going to tell you that we did not identify any deficiencies. So essentially a clean report there. The next report has to do with what we define as major programs. That means taking all of your federal grants, an assessment of those, and then there's a selection as to which ones would be tested. So this year it was your IDEA program. And if you read through this report, same idea. You're going to see that it says that we did not identify any deficiencies to be reported. So all is well and good there. Page 9 actually summarizes all of what I just mentioned in a little bit or formatting there. And ultimately, the last thing I was just going to point out is page 94. There's going to be, it'll show you the total federal dollars expended by the district this year. You'll see that's coming in right around $4 million now. So clearly you're over that threshold of needing that single audit uniform guidance audit piece. The other items that were issued with the audit, there were 2 letters. One was a required communication letter. It is just as stated, a required letter to communicate anything in relation to the audit if we had any problems. And ultimately, if you read through there, it's going to tell you we didn't have any problems. Any audit adjustments we made were not significant to produce variation to what you're seeing on a monthly basis in your reporting. So again, all is well and good there. It will say that we issued a separate management letter. I won't go into the detail behind that. It's nothing significant. It's just a suggestion for improvement. It's not a deficiency. So that is there for you to read as well. And other than that, that's all I have for you tonight. So do I have any questions? No. Okay. Perfect. That makes everyone's life easier, right? Okay, so if you ever come up with a question as you get a chance to look these over more, should you come up with something, Jeff as well as Doug have my contact information. Happy to answer questions on this or anything else that might come up for the financial world here. Again, I appreciate all of the time, all the effort that the school district puts into this. And Jeff and Doug, thank you very much as well. So you have a good evening. Oh, yes, sure.
Sorry. The question I have, you talked about the technology subscription.
Yes.
So next year, I looked at Dr. Harmon and I said, so that's our textbooks, that's any kind of subscription service that we have. We're gonna have to track that differently for the audit, or so when we're breaking that down, we just want to be ahead of it as opposed to scrambling at the end.
Right. So it's more focused on information technology based, but it is going to be essentially it takes a couple steps. Typically, the first thing you really want to do is be retaining those agreements. What we do typically is the first thing is we're going to get those agreements, and then we start to evaluate them in comparison to the standard. Even the lease one that we just evaluated, sometimes they have these little clauses in there that actually then make it that it doesn't apply. So there's unfortunately it's not as cut and dry as we all might hope, but basically what the district would start with is just accumulating the leases, or I'm sorry, the subscription agreements that would pertain to that, and then we would work with Jeff and Doug to review those and proceed from there.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
So if any board member has any questions after you've read through the report, you may contact Jeff, you contact Doug, or you can contact Jacqueline. Or go through Jeff and Doug to get to Jacqueline, to get your answers.
And I just want to thank Jacqueline and her team from Boyer and Ritter for all their work and their professionalism in the audit. And also want to thank Doug Furman for all of his work. He pretty much is the lead point in the audit process for the district and does a great job. So thank you both for your efforts as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to item 6, additions, deletions, or modifications to the agenda. None? Hearing of persons who wish to address the board with regards to agenda items. We do not have any of those at this point. Item 8, which matters for which board action is required, is Personnel Committee. And in Mrs. Rinker's absence, Mandy Weaver is going to take those motions, please.
Good evening. So for the Personnel Committee this evening, Mrs. Rinker is the chairperson. I sit on the committee, so in her absence, I am filling in. Number 1 is a recommendation to approve the creation of 1 new full-time personal care assistant support staff position based on student needs at a total annual expense of approximately $46,299. 2 is going to be a collection of leaves. I'm not going to read through all of them. A few of them are obviously Family and Medical Leave Act, as we can see. 3 is employment, and there is professional employment, day-to-day substitutes, and support personnel. And they're listed salaries and start dates. And, okay, and then C, D is co-curricular positions. E is community swim personnel, and F is 2022-2023 game help. And all of the people are listed there with their prorated and/or salaries. And that's it as far as new hires and things like that.
Thank you, Mandy. We have a motion. Is there a second? Cindy? We have a motion by Amanda Weaver, second by Cindy Boyer for agenda item 8A, 1, 2, 3, inclusive. Any comments, questions? So, just Jay.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. Jeff, how many total personal care assistant positions have we had to create this year?
I believe the number is 10. I want to say 10 since March.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Roll call, please, Jeff.
Mrs. Berger. Mrs. Boyer.
Yes.
Mr. Klausby.
Yes.
Mr. Galzella.
Yes.
Mr. Plessick.
Yes.
Mrs. Weaver.
Yes.
Mrs. Jinxt.
Yes.
Mr. Mummert.
Yes.
8 yes, 0 no.
So number 4 is our resignations. They are noted in the section, but more importantly, I just wanted to quickly kind of reiterate that for many of these are retirements. And the cumulative amount of years that these amazing teachers have worked in our district is over 200, if my quick math is correct. So it's certainly not to be ignored. It's sad to see people retiring, but after 35 years of doing the same job, I probably also want to retire. So respectfully, I'm very excited for whatever their futures hold for them and wish them the best of luck.
Thank you, Mandy. Moving on to our next item, 8B, Program Committee. Again, back to Mrs. Weaver.
Thank you again. So this is a recommendation to approve the request for an exception to policy 218.1, which is a weapons, and policy 222, tobacco and vaping products, for the purpose of rehearsing and presenting the Southwestern High School spring musical production of The Addams Family, in which actors will hold look-alike props. The spring musical public performance dates are March 16th, 17th, 18th of 2023.
We have a motion by Mandy Weaver and a second by Vanessa Berger.
So
For
just
agen-
as a little background,
Okay.
because I did get the chance to talk to Dwayne about this. He puts these through anytime any of his productions should utilize something that would even remotely touch upon a policy. We've done this for him 3 times and at the middle school multiple times, so this is not a new precedence that's being set. And they are, of course, props and will be housed at the high school.
Okay. Any questions or comments? Roll call, please, Jeff.
Mrs. Boyer.
Yes.
Mr. Klausby.
Yes.
Mr. Galzella.
Yes.
Mr. Plessick.
Yes.
Mrs. Weaver.
Yes.
Mrs. Jinxt.
Yes.
Mrs. Berger. Mr. Mummert.
Yes,
8 yes, 0 no.
thank you. Moving on to agenda 8C, Building Grounds and Equipment Committee, Mrs. Berger.
I'd like to make a motion that we approve item 8C1, which is a recommendation to approve the MOU between Southwestern School District and Penn Township Police Department to obtain real-time live video feeds from the district surveillance cameras when active circumstances at a school or facility present an immediate need for law enforcement or fire safety personnel to respond.
Second.
For me to repeat?
No.
Okay. I don't know if we want to have some additional information about that. Is somewhat self-explanatory.
Yeah, it's just an opportunity that if there's an event happening, they have access to the camera so they can oscillate or identify where the event is taking place. And it's an opportunity. I know Nate has worked with them, but it is an opportunity to provide safety for both the inhabitants in the building in the event of something happening, as well as the officers responding and other first responders as well. So it's just, again, I said it before, I'll say it again, and I don't want to sound like a broken record, but I don't think we could say it enough. Our partnership with our local law enforcement and first responders is some of the best I've ever seen. And I'm excited. Hopefully they never need it, but I'm excited to know that they're willing to partner with us in this to make sure the safety of everybody, including the officers, is primary.
And just a question or a clarification. I mean, I feel like we've had several circumstances before where that video has been shared. But this is just sort of that formal MOU to say, this is what we do.
Right, so this is real time as opposed to a recording to the
Okay.
event that took place.
Gotcha.
So they can actually call it up on their
Themselves.
computer in their car and see what's happening in real time.
And I'd like to add in on that, as someone who's managed these systems in a police agency, being able to tap in live feed is critical, especially when you have an expansive building, to be able to know live time, what area of the building to respond to. I mean, this is something that we should have in place for sure.
And to your point, Mr. Gillizel, there are times that, you know, it's over the holiday and a custodian gets a call and says, hey, there's something tripped in the back of the building, and it's just somebody left the door open, or, you know, a squirrel somehow got in and ran across and set off the camera. So it helps in that regard too, because if the building is empty and there's alarms going off, the police can respond
Right.
video wise, as opposed to someone driving all the way out. And they may still have to come out, but they can put to rest any alarm or any concern there may be for the safety of the building or the immediate surrounding area.
And the very least, respond to the immediate part of the building that's needed.
Correct.
And that's crucial, and capture if there's anything wrong going on, being able to respond directly to where it's occurring is instrumental.
Right.
Okay. Roll call, please.
Mr. Clausby,
Yes.
Mr. Gillizello,
Yes.
Mr. Plessick,
Yes.
Mrs. Weaver,
Yes.
Mrs. Jinxt,
Yes.
Mrs. Berger,
Yes.
Mrs. Boyer,
Yes.
Mr. Mummert.
Yes.
8 yes, 0 no.
Agenda item 8D, Student Community Relations Committee, Mrs. Boyer.
Thank you, Mr. Mulmer. I'd like to make a recommendation that we approve items 8D, 1 through 3. 1 and 2 being recommendations for our girls wrestling teams to attend tournaments. And 3 for our football team, weather permitting, to use the stadium on some Sundays coming up in January through March. And if weather is not good, they will be using our high school gymnasium.
We have a motion for agenda item 8D, 1, 2, and 3. Was there a second?
I'll second.
Matt, thank you. Any other comments or questions with regards to these?
I just want to say that Mr. Winters invited me on Friday night to Gettysburg College last week to see our girls wrestling team wrestle Gettysburg High School. And I don't know that I've ever been at a more exciting event. It was awesome. We did lose, but it was a 2-year, our girls were in their 2nd year. The team they were wrestling was in their 5th. So they had a little bit more experience. But I will say, I invite all of you, encourage all of you to go see it, because it was awesome. I'm so glad that the board agreed to sanction this and it will become a sport, but it was one of the best events I think I've ever seen on a high school level. It was a lot of fun, a lot of energy. So strongly recommend you get a chance, if you can, go and see them. Yep. And all our other teams as well.
17 we're hosting.
Yeah.
17.
Okay. We have a roll call, please.
Mr. Gillizello,
Yes.
Mr. Plessick,
Yes.
Mrs. Weaver,
Yes.
Mrs. Jinxt,
Yes.
Mrs. Berger,
Yes.
Mrs. Boyer,
Yes.
Mr. Clausby,
Yes.
Mr. Mummert.
Yes.
8 yes, 0 no.
The next item on our agenda is 8E, other matters for board consideration or action. We have several items there, and Jake Klausby, if you will, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mulmer. I'd like to make a motion that the board approve agenda items 8E, A through G.
We have a motion by Jake Klausby for agenda item 8E, A through G, second by Vanessa Berger.
A through F are final adoption of policies that we've had an opportunity to review and question, and G is a tentative.
I'd like a brief,
Yes,
I'd
Matt?
like a brief discussion related to policy 237, electronic devices. The end of the policy 237, I'll just quote it so you don't have to look it up. The violations of this policy by a student shall result in disciplinary action and may result in the confiscation of the device. I'd like us to insert temporary confiscation of device, as their devices are expensive. And if we're going to adopt a policy, let's be accurate and say it's a temporary confiscation, not a confiscation, which implies it could be permanent. And then the only other thing I wanted to discuss was 707. We discussed the use of facilities by outside agencies. I'm curious how often we rent to the category D, which is not local. I would put forward that maybe we should consider only renting our facilities to local organizations as opposed to any organization. But I'm curious as to how much revenue outside local agencies rentals produces for us.
If I remember correctly, didn't one year we have a request from a team out of Maryland to use the lacrosse, the facilities for lacrosse?
I don't have hard numbers for you. I'd have to look those up.
Good, Bob.
But just off the top of my head, I don't feel like our D usage is very high. I'd maintain, and I've always maintained, none of our fee structures, there's any net revenue to the district.
Right.
It's a wash. We don't go into this to make money. There's no profit for the district to be made, even on a D organization, as far as I'm concerned. The reality is all the above categories are subsidized by district district
Okay.
funds. And a D, I've always interpreted my goal is to make sure it washes and doesn't cost our taxpayers for an outside D type organization to use our facilities. But just the short of it, at the end of the year, D organizations are probably less than a dozen.
Right, and the reason I bring it to the board is my hesitation here is obviously we don't have the latitude to discriminate who uses our facilities. It should be open to anyone who wants to use them. However, I think we can safely limit to local as opposed to having, for lack of a better example, I'll go with the KKK from Nebraska wants to use our facilities. We can't tell them no because they're not. We have no means to discriminate in our facilities usage. So I would say if we limit to local use, I don't think we're losing much, but I think we gain the ability to better control who uses our facilities. What do you
Lee,
guys
from a
think?
legality point of view, local is semantically a very strange word. Is there, I'm trying to find it as I scroll
not
through
on.
it, but was there a distance? Is
true.
there a radius, a diameter? Is it in a tax-paying area? What
Yeah, I kind of asked the same question,
defines-
yeah.
We would just have to define it we'd have to define it in the
So
policy.
it's currently not.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see
I
it
cou- I didn't
defined in
see
the
it,
policy,
but-
yeah.
I didn't want to.
And if I could propose.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
God,
how
that has
how do you
administer to
interpret it?
That was the question that runs through my mind. As far as I'm concerned, I don't have any issue with that direction at all. I just question, how do we define,
Right.
Right, so
you
if
know,
we define.
who is local, who is not local? Is it your organization's headquartered? Do you have an address? Is it the number of participant? That's what's racing through my head
Right.
is how do I effectively interpret that and be able to tell this group yes and this group no?
Right.
Right.
That's my
Mhm.
question.
When we developed the policy years ago, one of the things we did was we looked at the fee structure. And we structured the fees in such a manner to make it a very big disincentive for those organizations. For example, we wouldn't want Tune and Pull Playhouse to rent out our auditorium for a month and a half to run a production where they're making a net profit off of us because we charge virtually nothing.
Right.
So we actually structured it in such a way that we don't, as Nate said, we don't have a whole lot of that activity. And I think it's working from that perspective.
Nate, obviously, it goes without saying, our own needs supersede any
Right.
outside need.
We always start at A, B, C, and come down in priority level, correct?
And I'm not trying to put forward we should limit A, B, or C in any way. I'm just saying the D, I question how often we use the D and whether it's a necessity considering we can't tell organizations no. If we eliminate D, we're at least to local, we're dealing with local agencies and organizations only. That's my point in that question.
So I would just throw out, just from my perspective of it, just to help wrestle with the questions that go through my brain is, so what is local? I guess I'm thinking as I look over at Dr. Hartman, when he partners with and helps, maybe facilitate, a college type
Right.
interaction, of course, in the district, is Millersville local? On my first blush, I'd say no. Is it a separate entity? Absolutely. How does that play and how do we define that? We still can do stuff like that, but not open the door for, like you said, some
So we don't,
arbitrary KKK from.
right. So
North
we don't
Dakota.
have a category C definition of local already in place? I mean, if we don't, then I think we should be defining that to assist you in defining.
Yeah, I don't know that we have a hard, fast black line on that.
Yeah, it should be.
Yeah, I think we should move to delay table final adoption of 707 till we at least define local organizations.
And this is only a first
This is
step.
a-
Oh, is it? Okay, this is the preliminary on this one. That's right.
Yeah,
Okay,
it says
sorry.
tentative.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so, I mean, I would agree that if internally, from your own internal procedures, there's no particular delineation, then at least we should determine what local means to differentiate between C and D. Not you, and then we can, I mean, I can look at other other districts and see how they define local, if and whether they define local or whether that's an internal procedure, process that, and how they're by zip code. What they mean, state, region, however that works. Mhm.
Good question. This question comes, Dr. Hartman just asked, and I think it's a good question. What if the PIAA wants to use our field for a playoff competition or something? Would
That's
that
right.
would that be considered a school-related organization because it's affiliated with and it's somewhat affiliated with our organization because we host interscholastic athletics. So would that fall under that umbrella as opposed to a category D? I think there's probably some semantics we do have to work out and how that would work.
It's actually a little different because we actually get revenues from PIAA if they have some
Right.
type of event like that, but it's not matched to our actual fee schedule. It's a different type of animal, I'd say. So I don't-
Well, even to your point, Mr. Osborne, Millersville, because that's a service that we bring in to provide for our teachers in terms of graduate school or professional development, does that become a school-related organization because it's at our request? But I think those are some of the things that we'll probably have to look at to make sure that we're not inadvertently excluding something that benefits us if they exceed the boundaries of whatever we define as local.
When I think the word sanctioned versus non-sanctioned, so like if you're talking, I'm not sure with the PIAA, but if they're doing something on our land, is it typically our teams competing?
No.
Not necessarily,
Right.
okay. So like, if it was something like bringing in a college for the teachers or, Boy Scout group or whatever it might be, if there are students in the district or teachers in the district that are in some way affiliated, then in my mind, that's local. But it could be as simple as tax-paying area. I don't know. I think, but then, right, then you're going to exclude unless it's directly related to the school.
I just think we should explore all those and really delineate a little bit better.
Sounds good.
Mr. Mummer, any further discussion on the recommendation for 8E, adding the word temporary, that I would need to amend my motion otherwise from the board or administration?
Well, that's what I was just
Yeah, I
sidebarring
needed
with
to.
here with Dr. Dalton. If the membership of the board is okay with adding the word temporary to the way the policy currently reads, we can proceed with it. We can modify it to say, with the addition of the word temporary.
Because
So
the
mo-
intent has always been temporary, it just modifies it to be clear.
Right, so moved.
Okay, so we do have your adjustment to that, and Vanessa, she's okay as well. Item G, first of all, this is our first read or tentative adoption. So administration and Dr. Dalton will go back and review that policy and bring forward necessary adjustments. Okay. That being said, any other questions with regards to these policies? Have a roll call, please, Joe.
Mr. Plessick,
Yes.
Mrs. Weaver,
Yes.
Mrs. Jingst,
Yes.
Mrs. Berger, Mrs. Boyer,
Yes.
Mr. Klausby,
Yes.
Mr. Galzella,
Yes.
Mr. Mummert.
Yes,
8 yes, 0 no.
thank you. proposed agenda items for January the 25th. We have finance and support services. Mrs. Yates, of course, will be bringing things forward to us. We have program committee from Mrs. Weaver, things coming forward, voting grounds and equipment, and student community relations. Items all of which will be brought forth at our next regular meeting on the 25th. Any additional comments you want to make on this?
No, just that, I know the health and safety plan under program committee is, just to give the board, we will not be recommending any additional changes, but under the federal dollars that we receive that are affiliated with the pandemic, that is required every 6 months. The last time we looked at it was October, so we will be looking at it again in January, which should then take us until the end of the year. But as the plan sits on our website now, there will be no additional recommendations. It'll stay as is, pending your approval.
Okay. Okay. Planning and discussion.
So I had a discussion with our solicitor and our administration regarding to something I wanted to suggest. And I want to preface it by giving the reason for it. And that would be over the past year, as I've sat here and as we've sat here, we've seen a great many number of teachers leaving our district. And it's teachers, much like we saw tonight with Miss Meckley, 40.26 years, Kuntz with 35 years, Lamanna with 32 years. We're losing our teachers of longevity. And that alarms me. I know a lot of them are retiring, and we mark them as a retirement or personal reasons, but my concerns are as they retire, they might be retiring because they are fed up. And I'm not saying that's necessarily something we do, but that is a concern of mine, that it might be something that we're adding to make them want to retire. So along those lines, what I've had discussions with several teachers, and one actually suggested that we institute an anonymous survey among our teachers that they can respond to where their email isn't attached, and the board would receive in Google survey format. You can do a survey and those results come to a spreadsheet that only the board would be able to view. And we would get a very realistic picture of what concerns our teachers have. And that could be both positive and negative. They could say, we love it here, and we'd be able to point to that and say, this is proof positive. Our teachers love what's going on here, but it also might make us aware as policymakers what's occurring that we might not know about. I think it's a legitimate way to reach out to tell the teachers we care about your concerns. And I'm not trying to intimate our administration doesn't do that. I'm just saying that as a board, to effectively do our jobs, we need to know as much as we can about what's occurring here at our schools. And I think that's something that I'd like very much to institute, and I wanted to see what the board has to say.
Anybody?
Do we do any form of exit interview, exit survey?
Get your microphone.
Yeah, we do offer exit surveys. It's a Google form, like Mr. Gelazella suggested for his idea. We also, along with that, if anybody wants to do it face to face, they can, but normally they opt for that. We collect data in December. We do employee intention feedback, where that's an opportunity for teachers to give feedback on if they're satisfied in their current role or not, if they'd like to be considered for something else, if their plans for the future are undecided. There's a lot of data collection throughout the course of a school year that takes place in those regards, I would say. One thing we just had a brief conversation about it today in our administrative meeting, is instituting kind of more as a proactive approach to where kind of an exit survey is once somebody's exited. We're working on instituting stay interviews this year for anybody who on their employee intention may have indicated that they're considering another option or their plans are undecided at this time. So we're always looking at ways we can glean information from our faculty, from our staff. I think sometimes you can survey people to death. So I think there's other ways of sometimes getting that information as well, in addition to surveys, which can be good, can give you good data.
And the reason I suggest I'm sorry.
No, go right ahead.
The reason I suggest this mode is anytime an employee doesn't like something that's instituted by a boss, they're going to hesitate to speak up. And it's just a natural hesitation. If we anonymize the ability of them to speak out, I think we gain a truer, more honest evaluation of what's happening in our schools. I think that's the piece that we're missing.
Comment, yes, Mandy.
So my background is not in education. My background prior to owning a business was in the corporate world, and the corporate world is very different than the world of education. And in the corporate world, it's not uncommon, especially for the larger corporations that would be like your Forbes lists and things like that, to do what are called 360-degree reviews. I'm sure some of you have been part of 360-degree reviews. I have personally, and that review is called a 360-degree review because it involves everybody within 360 degrees of you turning around. So it is your management, it is the people under you, it is the people next to you, it's stakeholders. And it's very, very common in the corporate world. I have done a lot of research as to whether this is done in the education sector, and the general consensus is it is not, for many reasons. But one of the greatest ones is that job descriptions and job roles in education are constantly changing. So when you're trying to review someone, when what they did on Tuesday may be a different thing that they have to do on Thursday because someone at a desk somewhere made a decision that changed the entire way their process worked, it makes it a little bit harder to set goals and objectives and then define them for 360-degree reviews. So I think the first thing we would need to remember is that when you go to a restaurant and then you enjoy yourself, you are far less likely to tell someone. When you go to a restaurant and you have the worst experience you've ever had in your life, you're going to tell everyone. So when you send a survey out and someone may not be upset, like you said, maybe they love their job, it will be statistically less likely that they will fill out that survey because they love their job. So does that then taint the reviews to only show the negative, thus forgetting the positive, and also remembering that the people on the other end are just that, they are people. And no one wants to hear consistently only of the things that they do wrong. So while I definitely see the value to getting the temperature of the district and things like that, I would be more inclined to having our administration, and I'm certainly not asking them to do this, but just throwing this out there, to work towards a review that would allow for all the stakeholders in a position to be able to have constructive feedback, both positive and negative, because like you said, and Dr. Hartman just said, when you know that someone maybe might be on the edge, the theory is men don't end, right? So if the opportunity exists to fix before cutting ties happens, then that is from a place of strength that you can come versus a place of reactivity. Unfortunately, education has always historically been reactive. You know, we still have a September to June schedule, which was created to help agricultural families that would need their children home for the planting season. You know, PSSAs and state assessment tests were created back in the Cold War time because Russia beat us to space. So, you know, we come from a place in education of more reactivity. And unfortunately, a lot of that has to come down to the fact that things are just constantly changing. So I definitely see the value to what you're asking for. I just think that in an environment like we have, allowing it to come in a structured format where the raters and the ratees are people that actually work one-on-one with these people, because when it's anonymous, you Maybe they don't even work with them. Maybe they heard third party that someone was unhappy and then they took to the internet and railed you on a Google form and you never sat next to that person ever. We wouldn't know that. We would never know that because it's synonymous. So I am completely for a review process that gives a better holistic view of the health of a building, the health of an employee. But I don't, the Google form scares me because of the anonymity, not because I want anybody to be penalized for reporting something or feeling as though they cannot. But there will be people that will falsely report, because that happens all the time, from places of inference instead of fact. So having some sort of a fact check so that we do have an honest all-around opinion coming in, I think is very important. So I certainly don't want to say no, but I think there's more that we can do with this that will then help our district move forward in a positive light, taking into consideration what is being said by the stakeholders that exist in these buildings, but also, for lack of better terms, filtering out the noise, because sometimes it is noise. And unfortunately, that can drown out the things that are actually important, which is something that we might be able to see if we can structure this a little bit better. So, sorry, that was very long-winded.
So if I can piggyback on that, though, to your point, Amanda, they are, those types of surveys, 360-degree surveys, school culture, parallel surveys, they call them sometimes, because sometimes they do them of staff, students, parents, and you get a whole holistic view of how all stakeholders view. They are becoming more commonplace. Those tools are out there. So you're right. They tend not to be as common in educational settings, but there are some companies and some organizations I do some work with, or I'm familiar with, that do those, and you are seeing those, and they're great. I would say Gallup, for example. Everybody's heard of Gallup polls. Gallup has a great employee engagement survey that measures some of those things you're talking about. They come with a cost. But if you're going to do something like that, my recommendation for my seat, from somebody who interacts with personnel all the time and wants to make decisions based off that data, not just collect it, if we were to go to a route like that, you got to be concerned with validity and reliability of the tool you're using. So even though it's an investment, I think if as an organization we think that's important, we want to value that. I'd like to research some tools that have been researched, have been validated, have been ruled reliable, not, a couple of us sitting in a room coming up with a Google survey where we're not trained in designing good survey instrument tools and so on. There is an art and a science to that. But there are tools out there, and they are becoming more common. One of the things I think, and we've looked into those before, I guess from my perspective, the other thing to consider is an investment in that. Is that where our priorities should lie right now? I'm not saying they should. That data is always good to collect. Or is the data we're currently collecting through other means insufficient? That's a conversation to have as well. I know it's alarming when we see on board agendas and so on resignations. From my seat, when we're floating with a 92 to 96% retention rate, still, I don't know if that's investment is a priority as much as, from a personnel side, a bigger concern of mine is recruitment, not retention. At this point, it's not that we're losing people in droves. It's that when they do leave, there isn't the workforce to replace them.
And I'd like to kind of piggyback on that. I mean, when we see 40 years, 38 years, 35 years, that's the norm. I mean, that's someone who has reached retirement age, in some cases gone 5 or 6 years beyond retirement age and retired. It's when we see someone at 5 years, 10 years, that's what would raise a red flag. I don't see that here, and we see that here and there over the years. I mean, I think.
Support staff, we see that more.
Right, certainly.
My comments
Right.
were referencing professional staff.
Exactly. So if we look at that data over 20 years, I mean, I don't think we have any alarming statistics of, again, a lack of a retention rate in the 50s and the 60s, people leaving after 2 years, 5 years. I mean, these are really stellar numbers. So.
Mr. Crosby?
The other thing that I'd like to add is we have two teachers in the audience this evening, and we have plenty of building administrators. I would like to hear their input as to whether or not they are afforded the opportunity to get the necessary information to their department chairs. And if it gets from their department chair to the building administrator, and then the building administrator over to administration if there are any problems. Because I'm not hearing of any of situations like that. As someone that has 4 retired teachers and 1 teacher on sabbatical in my family, all kidding aside, they will tell you if you want to get a pulse on a building, spend 5 minutes in a teacher's lounge and you'll know who's happy and who isn't happy. But I would appreciate it if you were comfortable, if you could tell us whether you are afforded the opportunity as necessary, if you have a critical concern that needs to get to the administration as well as the board.
Well, we do have several.
Microphone, please. I'm sorry.
We do have several things in place that we can use, for example, building liaison, district liaison. A lot of us are in constant communication with our administrators. So those opportunities are there. But I also would say on the other side, personal stories are also very important. I think probably more important than an anonymous survey. So I would also encourage you guys, talk to us. We're here. A lot of us, always prize honesty and sharing over anything else.
I'd just like to respond to some of the thoughts we brought up. So along the lines of those people staying for 40-some years, I very much want to hear from them. I have requested to see our exit interviews at least 3 times, 3 separate board meetings. I have yet to see one. So this is kind of born of that and a desire to hear from our teachers who have longevity here, is what their opinions are. As a board member, I don't feel like I'm getting that. And that's where I am striving to create a better connection to our teachers by surveying them directly and allowing them the opportunity. I would ask our teachers and here as well, do you know of any hesitation among teachers to bring issues forward?
I'm only been a teacher for about 9 years. I feel very comfortable going to our administrators, both at the district level and at the building level. I mean, I can't speak for everybody. I feel perfectly comfortable going into any one of their offices and shutting the door and having a conversation. Nationally, it's been difficult for teachers because of the pushback we've gotten from the communities and saying that we're not doing our job and there is distrust. People attacking us on social media, that has been most difficult for me personally. And so I'm a human being and not a pawn in a political game. I do feel like my administration has had my back throughout the last year in particular. But since COVID, it's been very, very difficult to do this job because I feel like we do not have the support of families in the community.
Okay, thank you. And the last additional part I would add is the couple inferences were made that we need to filter out the noise. I give this board credit that if we were to receive survey results, each and every one of us has the intelligence to discern what's noise and sour grapes and what is a valid concern. I give us all that credit. I think we're fully capable to do that, and we don't need someone else to do that for us. That's why I want to see it firsthand, unfiltered, what the concerns of teachers are. So.
Other comments or questions or? I'm of the opinion that our administration is doing a significant and wonderful job with what they're doing, personnel-wise, interview-wise, exit-wise. And I understand if you're not getting information that you're looking for, that we need to address that. But I don't think it's something that we as a board should be doing because I think that's over and above I mean, creating a survey by the board is over and above what the responsibilities of the board is. That's what we designate to our administration and they need to do and report to us. So in my opinion, that's why we hired our administrators to run the school district for us. We, as a board, don't run the school on a day-to-day basis. That's not our job. So that's my opinion. Anybody else care to jive in? Okay, the administration, Dan, if possible, we could get some additional information. I can maybe talk to you about our exit interview things and data and what we can do to disseminate that to the board.
We do. I did, in our couple board reports I did provide some data on where we were at with that. I don't
Okay,
do it every
within your-
board report, but every
within your
now and then,
written
about every
report.
6 months, we'll do a review and send out that data. I can do it more frequently, but I don't know how, we don't have that kind of sample size bias. You're not going to have that many people leaving that it's from month to month. The data is not going to change very frequently.
So, okay, so
We will provide another.
I will be,
Yeah.
I'll be first to admit that there isn't every line item in every administrator's report that I read, and I may be at fault for that, but if that information is in there, that's great. And if it's twice a year, that may be sufficient. But then again, if there's a board member that's looking for something more specific, then I think that's something we would need to address down the road.
It was just the kind of bulleted list of some of the job satisfaction indicators and, kind of an overall holistic look at it, not broken down by departments or job positions.
It was inclusive of the entire staff.
Yeah,
correct?
yeah, and then certainly broken down, and then some information about the different types of employees that are completing the exit surveys, like the percentage of support staff versus professional staff versus, no individual comments are included in that. So that's one of the things, I mean, one of the first things in the survey is that it kind of guarantees anonymity to the survey completer. So if that's something that we want to share out more regularly, we want to maybe change that statement in our tool.
But we can,
Take another look at that.
yeah, we can, come on, there we go. We could have that, Dr. Hartman can send that to me and I can forward it to the board, or Dwayne can forward it. Or even, Dr. Hartman, you can send it tomorrow. You have access to their email addresses too. And we can make that available to all of you for your review. And if there's questions about it, you can talk to Dr. Hartman directly and/or we can address them at the next board meeting as well.
And just one additional note as far as our resignations, and I see this quite often for people resigning from a position, they request to stay on a substitute list. So they're not leaving for, they're dissatisfied with the job we're doing because they want to remain and help on a substitute position. So.
And along those resignation lines, this is the first time I've seen in any of our agendas where several of the entries don't even have a reason. Mr. Kuntz, the music teacher, it didn't say whether he's retiring, leaving for personal reasons, it just says 35 years. Same thing for Lamana and for Ms. Durka. I'm sorry,
They're all
Tarika. I
retirements.
apologize. So they're all retirements? Okay,
Yeah, when it gives the years of service, that's to indicate
it's just,
a retirement.
okay,
It's just the word retirement wasn't prepared.
okay.
Okay. Anything under planning and discussion? I will mention, Dr. like I said earlier at the beginning of this meeting, Dr. Rinker was here. He dropped off a letter to me. This is just an information type thing for tonight. Mrs. Rinker has requested to retire from the board. And that's the gist of this letter. We will act on this at our regular meeting at the end of January.
Mr. Mummer,
vi-
when did negotiations start? She was part of that committee.
I have made adjustments to those committees, and replacing Ann will be Vanessa Berger.
I see.
And negotiations will be starting February 1st. Soon.
Mr. Mummer, at your
Yes, ma'am.
convenience, can you resend the sheet with everybody's
I
Updated.
sent adjustments to
With the
Dwayne this
okay,
afternoon, and
perfect?
as soon as he has an opportunity, he will send out the corrected lists.
Okay, thank you so much.
Visitors, just going to pull these up as they're listed, or as they're stacked here. Mr. Stephen Carr.
Name is Stephen Carr. I'm a district taxpayer and alumni here. Speaking of teachers in education, I went through the CASEL or social emotional learning thing that where the school gets it from. And the concerns I have with it is that if you guys are going to be administrating this, then I would suggest a parental consent from the parents, because the detailed findings that they find in this is more like therapy from a therapist or occupational therapist rather than or a parent. Like, for instance, it says they had identified goal setting of self-management problem, solving conflict and resolution and refusal skills and decision making, about self-school and social topics, including perceptions of self-esteem and self-concept and emotional behavior. That sounds like something that you would go to a emotional support with, or a therapy, or a counselor with, or a parent with, not somebody that's a teacher. I mean, these people are trained in this, not teachers. Teachers are here to teach the people and mold the minds, not control their feelings and not to control who they are and what they feel. I went through actually a list of questions that they asked for the social emotional learning, and it seemed very personal skills that they probed you with. They talked about, what would you like to kiss somebody, or how do you feel about your body, or what's the best part of your body, or how's your friends feel about you, or how do you feel about yourself? These are all like therapy questions. Teachers are here to mold the minds and like teach history and teach American history, teach social studies, and teach like the classical stuff that they used to teach in schools, culture, but not like this kind of stuff. This stuff is like to like actually control the people or the kids. And this is like communist stuff, actually. No offense to anybody here, but that's what it seems like to me. Also, on the framework, family is like the farthest from the school. When we leave to come to school, family is the first place that you leave from, and the last place that you go to. If you take the family away from the kids, and you start teaching them, then they're not going to trust their parents. They're not going to trust the family. Family is the oldest institute in government, and then it's church, and then it is school, and then it is the bigger government. So we need to get back to that, to where it's family is the basic society, and then it gets bigger, not taking it away from classrooms and schools, and then the communities. So that's my idea.
Thank you, sir. Matt Smith.
Haven't been here in a while, in a couple months. End of the year is always busy for me. I agree with what he said though too, and I could add on to what Ms. Weaver said, because I have over a decade in the financial industry and corporate management, and the way I would always try to do things outside the box. So I had 17 people that worked for me, so I'd have them come in my office, and I'm like, hey, look, tell me what's going on. What's whispering in the corner or whatever. If that doesn't work, it's kind of like the community policing aspect of it. When people are eating, they talk more. When they're happy, they talk more. So when they're happy and they're eating, they talk more about not only what they do like, but what they don't like. So like Mandy was saying, it's not a one size fits all, and Dr. Hartman pointed that out too. It's not one size fits all. It's, you got to trust, kind of like Mr. Mummer said, you got to trust the administrators to do these things. At the same time, we got to back up the teachers, and I actually thought about the teachers that I've talked to over the last 3 or 4 months, about 80, over 80 in York County and Adams County. And a lot of what I'm hearing is since COVID, they don't have backup. So they have all this other stuff. Yes, there's people coming after them. Yes, me, I go after people too. We all do, right? So they don't have the support they need. But then there's also the politics. So that's what I'm hearing a lot, especially with teachers in our district. So over 20 of them that I talked to were from this district in the last couple months. And that's what I hear a lot is the politics of it. So like when I get attacked and being told keep politics out of education, I get told that, and that's what I'm saying. So it's just a circle. And I'm like, no, we got to keep it out of it. So what they feel is they don't have support at certain levels. So they're bullied to pay dues to a union. What did the union do? They gave $400,000 to a governor candidate, but they didn't want their money going to that. So they saw from the COVID policies down to everything else and politics. It's all these things are bothering them. It's not our district. I know what Director Gelazila was saying. It's not just our district. Since COVID, nationwide, it's a problem. Teachers are leaving the industry. They are. They're going to be bartenders. They're going to be like sell used cars. I've talked to a lot. It's nationwide. It's not just our district, and it's not just this meeting. It's not the resignations this month. It's the last 2 years. There is a pattern, not just in our district. I'm not saying it's alarming in our district, but nationwide, it is very alarming. So that's one of those things. Like I said, it's the community policing thing. We have to talk. Everybody's got to talk to everybody. Everybody's got to work together to make it function properly. If there's no oil in the car, the engine's got to lock up, right? So, I mean, we got to make sure we're putting oil in the car, and making sure the car has washer fluid so we can see out the window too, right? So we got to do all those things. And that's what I'm hearing the most from teachers is that they have support at different levels. Like maybe somebody says, hey, let's get all the teachers from this school together and let's go to Old Country Buffet if they still exist. I don't know. But let's go somewhere. Let's go to the buffet there on the Chinese buffet. Let's go there. Everybody has a good time and they talk about, hey, what can we do? What can we work on? So like President Mummer said, it's not you guys' job to micromanage. That's what the administrators are for. So if we can all talk and come up with those ideas for the administrators, like sidebar with teachers. Hey, what do you think about this? Obviously, there's going to be teachers that are afraid to say things because I hear that all the time because of politics. So I think if we could support the teachers more, then mentally the teachers would be more there, for their own support. Hey, I need help with this, right? Because right now they're not. So that's really what we got to work on is every aspect of it, not 1, 2, 3 perspectives. We need 8 perspectives from everybody to figure out how to do that. But that's what I'm hearing. The teachers are just they're feeling down, man. The teachers are really feeling down, and then they got kids that don't listen, don't behave because the parents are absent or they're working too much and everything else. So that's all I have.
Thank you, Matt. Well, we have signed in Jen and Joanna Dodge. Any comments, questions? I believe I've gone over, covered the sign-ins that I had. Any other, Mr. Gelsinger?
Yes, sir. Keith Gelsner, for those of you who don't know me. I wasn't planning on speaking, but when the topic came up as far as the surveys of the teachers, I actually texted my wife and asked her if she would allow me to speak about it. So I am not speaking on my wife's behalf, but I will say from a perspective of a taxpayer who knows a lot of teachers and who talks to a lot of teachers on a personal level. I agree with you, Mr. Klausby. The water cooler is a great place for information. The sign of the horse is even a better place because all the teachers go there and half of them work there. I will say that I think you guys are being snowballed. There are teachers that are not happy in this district, and whether they're willing to share their concerns with you, or whether they're fearful from the union, or whether they're fearful for other reasons, I don't know the answer to all of them. Some of them I do, but I will not share those. That is up to you guys to figure that out. I will say I know teachers that have left this district in the last couple of years, and they left because of the morale. And they would not be willing to share that with you during a exit interview, sir. I guarantee it. Because they want the exit to be polite, I guess. In the military, we had a process in place. You guys are big on policies. You know, I challenge you if we have any kind of procedure for the teachers to report grievances anonymously without fear of consequences. Even in the military, we actually had any mouse boxes. It probably wasn't spelled right by the education level. It was an actual mailbox that sat in front of our CO's office, and it was built like a mailbox. And you could put comments in that box, and the only person that had a key to it would be the superintendent, or in our case, the CO. And it was up to him to go find out what the problem was, if there was a trend. My wife did say I could quote her on this. And again, she is not completely unhappy. I'm sure every teacher and every person in a job has problems at some point. But her quote was pretty much something to the effect of, what's it hurt to send a survey? It's a couple minutes. You might find out some information that you don't want to know. And I'm glad that these teachers were willing to share their comments. But I would also say that we all know that you guys are very vocal and you're willing to share, and you have the support of the admin staff. There's a lot of teachers that don't feel that way. And it's up to you guys to figure out what that is, if it applies to middle school, elementary school, high school, whatever it may be. So I would not just completely write it off. As board members, I would encourage you to at least maybe just ask the teachers simply, do you guys want us to do a survey? Maybe that's the first question, yes or no, and then go from there. That's all I have. Thanks.
Thank you. Anybody else from the audience? Jeff Mummer, do you have a comment you wanted to make?
Yes, the previously announced finance committee meeting that was scheduled for next Monday evening is going to be canceled. We don't have the budget and won't have the budget ready at that point in time. The following Monday is still going to be held January 23rd, and that's when we'll start the budgetary process. So you get next Monday night off.
Any other board member have any additional information to share? Hearing nothing, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Matt, second? Mandy? Don't be bashful. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no? Meeting adjourned at 8:17 PM. Thank you all for your attendance and whatever that other word was.
Thanks, Steven. Yeah, sure. I will do. Thank you.
Participation. That's the word.
Oh, yeah.